All right, we are here with David Politis, who is the founder, editor, and publisher of Utah Money Watch, and a good friend. It's always fun when that happens. How are you?
I'm great, Garrett. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, yeah, thank you for taking the time. It's currently scalding hot outside. This will be released when it's probably even hotter,
Yes.
but we're in the throes of it. You were with Silicon Slopes for a while, and we had a lot of fun, engaging conversations.
We did.
Um, I love your text messages and your emails. If you were to send me something without signing your name, I would know it was you 99 times out of 100 with your writing style. But really passionate about telling stories and communicating what is happening in Utah. So I'd be interested in what you've been up to in the last couple of years and what Utah Money Watch is.
What I've been doing over the last couple of years, wow, that's interesting. Well, to your point, it was a real privilege to join you, Clint, the rest of the team at Silicon Slopes. That was not something I was expecting. And I was invited in and pretty much told, pick your title, but basically take over the written side of editorial for Silicon Slopes. And so I ended up being the self-appointed title publisher and editorial director or vice president of content. And that kind of morphed over the time. I wasn't there very long, about 14 months. But during that time, my calculations said that I probably wrote over 100,000 words of editorial content, started doing podcasts and, helping with PR and just really getting to know just not the technical, quote, Silicon Slopes, the technology companies. Because the reality is technology has advanced so much today. Every organization is a tech company.
Yeah.
And so when I think of Silicon Slopes, I think of U.S. Steel. Mm-hmm. I think of the ag companies, the farmers and the ranchers. I think of government. They're all tech companies, even though that's not their finished good, their finished product or service. They're all tech companies. And if they're not, they're dying. So it made sense for us to look at all organizations from the farthest reaches of, Wendover to Duchesne down to, Washington County, all the way up to Cache Valley and everything in between. And that was really eye-opening for me. All the things that were going on. It was a real blessing in my life, actually.
Yeah.
And then I got recruited away. And unfortunately, the things that I was promised didn't happen. And so 90 days later, I got let go. And so I've been consulting as a marketing executive, a fractional marketing executive. But a little over a year ago, call it June of 2023, my journalistic juices got going again. And so I started Utah Money Watch as the first proof point to say, is there a way that I can help anybody who's in Utah or is interested in Utah learn what's really going on from a monetary financial standpoint and not just a regurgitation of press releases? And so that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah. Because when we were working together, AI was around and it was often talked about, but it really wasn't at the forefront where you could regurgitate press releases and win a Pulitzer Prize. You had to actually tweak it a little bit here or there, and nobody needs that. That's what I always like about you is you'll dig and pry and find your own angle and do the research. And it seems a bit more like Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg, where you actually want to read the story.
Thank you.
Because there's substance and oftentimes entertainment as well. Because if you want just the substance, you read the 10Ks or the 10Qs, right? But you have a flair. With anything Utah, I think you're kind of at the vanguard of in-depth reporting.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That's what I'm trying to do. And you mentioned Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal. Look, whether you're a simple, quote unquote, retail investor or consumer, or whether you're an entrepreneur or a senior executive, if you want to know what's happening on Wall Street, turn to Dow Jones, Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Bloomberg, Financial Times of London. They'll give you the news and they'll do great reporting, great analysis. The challenge is they're focused on multi-billion-dollar firms. There's not a lot of those in Utah, number one. And two, as a result, they're not focused on what's happening when a firm raises $2 million, which just happened, right?
Yeah.
And yet that firm has now gone on to raise $9 million total, not a lot of money, but they're working with thousands of customers, changing their businesses, helping consumers. That doesn't get covered in the Journal, on CNBC, in Bloomberg. And that's what I'm trying to do. But from a financial/monetary standpoint or a business standpoint,
I don't even think it gets covered locally. Right?
you want me to go and piss off some people. I don't know if I'm going to do that. But
I
it's
don't
like,
think it does.
look, one of the things you can go to, UtahMoneyWatch.com.
Yep.
You can spell it. It's pretty easy. Go to the About section. And I'll say, we will never regurgitate press releases. And unfortunately, so much of what is seen as journalism today is literally cut and paste of news releases. I can track that on my own. I don't need to get that from ABC Corporation.
Right.
I can get it directly from PR Newswire, PR Web, Business Wire, and a whole list of others, right? If I want, in fact, that's all I want. Because now I'm just getting their angle, right? But what I really want to know is, what's the real story? What's happening? And it's tougher when a company is private.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment a company, it becomes publicly traded, there's additional data if you know where to go and to find the story behind the story and then provide context for your audience. That's what I try to do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when we reached out to you, you had done a piece on the Bill.com acquisition, and you actually had the courage to like break down the numbers and do some math.
Yeah.
And I remember being like, well, that's better than anything else I've ever seen.
Well, I mean,
Not from the Wall Street Journal. Or
right.
Like,
Well, and you're referring to when Divvy,
yeah.
A big unicorn here in Utah several years ago, was acquired by Bill.com. And it was big news. All the local media picked it up. Multi-billion-dollar acquisition is like, why did they pay so much money for this company that I think at the time was doing about $100 million? And I want to say it was a $2.5 billion acquisition. It's like, that's 25 times revenue, not profit, revenue.
Yeah.
Now, as a SaaS company, okay, it maybe would have been 15, 18x of their, quote, EBITDA, right? Earnings before income tax and amortization. The data was there. Mm-hmm. You just had to look. And the number was in one of their investor presentations by Bill. It was like a $1 trillion. The TAM was massive. Why? Bill.com was not in the credit card world. Divvy was. Mm-hmm. And the TAM was massive. That's why they wrote that check that was so big.
Yeah.
So,
and that's easy to do after the fact, right? A good story of like, here's why the valuation was this. But again, if you're doing it like in real time, it lives forever on the internet, and you put your money where your mouth is. And I always appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It reminds me, for example, of a story that I did when I was at Silicon Slopes. It's like, I saw this press release cross my feed about something called green hydrogen, which I'd never even heard of before, that was going to be created in Delta, Utah, of all place, by a company called ACES that I'd never heard of before. And the only thing I knew about Delta, besides I think their mascots for their high school team is the Rabbits, yep. Right, is the fact that IPP was there, the Intermountain Power Project, which is this big coal-burning / petroleum-burning power plant, sending most of its power down to Southern California. But they were talking about salt domes. Like, what the heck is a salt dome? So I'm like, honey, I'm going to Delta. And on a Saturday afternoon, I drove down to Delta and checked everything out. And this is a massive green energy thing that's happening in, Millard County, I think that's right?
I think so, yeah.
Down in Delta that nobody knew about.
Yeah.
Like multi-billion-dollar project that Chevron now owns, Mitsubishi's a part owner in, And it turns out Utah is this very interesting emerging green tech or, ecosystem. If the tree falls in the forest and no one's there and they don't hear it, guess what? Did it make a sound? Yeah, but nobody heard it. If companies are doing stuff and nobody knows about it, guess what? It didn't happen.
Yeah.
It's invisible. So
Yeah, and that's to your point, big money, and it's stuff that actually matters, like power and electricity to people's homes for air conditioning and their Teslas,
oh yeah,
all of that stuff.
sure.
Why do you? I've always been intrigued. Like, why do you enjoy this so much? The writing, the researching, the digging. You actually love it. You're not doing it for the paycheck. You enjoy it.
Well, my paycheck today from it is zero. So I haven't raised any money, just my time, my own personal money into it. I do love it. I realized that I've been writing since I was in third grade. And I had some really good teachers, both in high school, college, that encouraged me, helped me to refine my craft. And then while I studied mass communications at BYU, specifically with an emphasis in PR, my advisor, who was professionally from the PR field, he's like, if you're going to be in PR, you have to write. And he was very clear. You have to be able to write up to 75% of the time. So learn how to write it like a journalist does. I did. And then it was, so push pause. This is one of the things that I do, right? You know that. It's like, I leave school. I get my first job back home in Silicon Valley. I'm working for a high-tech agency, doing PR stuff for them, for their clients, move up to Seattle, and then land my very first publicly traded client. And we were doing their advertising and their PR, but also their investor relations. And I got to help write their annual report and their quarterly reports and put out announcements about their earnings. And I started learning about this whole marketplace called Wall Street I've never learned about in college. And the more I dug, the more I was like, this is fascinating. And then I had this aha moment. The more technical a company was, the harder it was for the brokers and dealers to explain to their retail investors, to Joe Beer Can or Mamacita Juanita, what the heck this company was and why they should invest in them because it was technical.
Yeah. And this was in the 90s or 80s?
This would have been in the early 90s. And it's like, oh, wait, I know how to do that. I have this, call it a God-given gift. Mm-hmm. Take things that are technical, not be afraid to ask stupid questions. What is this? Can I explain this so my mother-in-law will understand at a very high level? I can always get more granular, get more technical.
Yeah.
It's, what is this in 30 seconds left? The elevator pitch, right?
Yeah.
That's what every entrepreneur learns if they want to raise money. What's your elevator pitch? Can you tell me in 30 seconds or less? Can you explain it in writing in 50 words or fewer? I can do that.
Yeah.
Oh, and I have this insatiable curiosity. What's really going on here? Why did this happen? How did this happen? Where, when, why, all of that. It's just fun for me.
When Groupon was getting ready to go public, I think they invented all sorts of new accounting principles. And I was an intern at a private equity and fund and a fund of funds, and we were going over it, and it was, what the hell are they talking about?
Right, non-GAAP numbers.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, sweet, they're just making up new things.
They are.
And even like the smartest people in the room were like, and they read these things constantly. They're like, something's off with this one. Because the people writing it, I think on purpose, were trying to be convoluted.
Right. They're trying to make the pig's ear into a sow's purse. Is that the saying? I'm probably butchering that, but make a pile of crap.
Yeah.
Smell nice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it was off-putting. And then you read one that's like really well broken down and concise. And again, like you could explain it to your grandmother. It's like, why doesn't everyone just do that? But we all know the answers to that one. But my gosh, it's good. It's really refreshing when you can read a document or, an article and have a really good idea of what the company does, why it does it, or what the actual story is.
Right. Well, and occasionally, I have my ways of tracking news and information and stuff. I track the other local and national media, of course. But I mean, for instance, a little over 2 months ago, a news media in a very targeted industry wrote this very brief story about a Park City organization was getting started to help treat people with addictions. Like, okay. And they'd raised they said $16 million it was, and it was 15 and change, but still. And I was like, that's interesting. And then I started digging and digging and digging, and I found their website, and turns out that they had the phone number on their website was 801-555-1234. And I'm like, what the hell? That's a fake number. And then when I saw that, I was like, well, where are these guys located? And they had their address and they had a map. So I pulled up Google Maps. The street doesn't exist in Park City. I'm like, what? So I drove up there. And then, anyway, I think they're legit, but they probably shouldn't have told the world that they were even in business, but they did. They're not ready to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
And that's just an example. But sometimes companies don't tell others what they're doing, either because of fear or because they don't know how. And so you end up with shocking stories. There's been probably 3 or 4 shocking stories on the news front in the business world today in the last 3 months. Like, who the crap is PAX Group? Well, if you're a Utah Jazz fan, you may have seen their logos, right? But what do they do? Did you have any idea they did $3.1 billion in revenue in 2023? What?
No, you're usually the one that would tell me these types of things.
It's like, well, okay, or who's Waystar?
Yeah.
Waystar wasn't even a Utah company until the private equity groups that own them named a new CEO who went to BYU, who grew up here, and now they started with an office, and now it's actually listed as their headquarters, even though they still have the headquarters, they say, in Louisville. Their real headquarters is here. Mm-hmm. That's the address that's listed on their SEC filings now. They just went public and raised almost $1 billion, and they're massive, and they're going to be a big company.
Yeah, I've heard of them. Do you find your scoops and your stories by yourself? Do you have people reach out? How do you get your leads?
Occasionally, I have PR people or executives that'll reach me. Unfortunately, most of them will say, hey, I've got this new product. I don't do product stories. You have to really convince me that it's a massive monetary story, because that's our focus is on money, always about financials and that type of stuff. But most of the time, it's just through press releases that are put out or media coverage from other organizations. And if something strikes my attention, then I'm like, dig a little bit. Is it actually worth diving into? But right now, it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've been able to watch the change in the Utah ecosystem. Stories that we would have told or talked about 8 years ago, probably we don't today, because everything changes and evolves, which is great. You're going to use one of your fancy words here, I'm pretty sure. But one thing over the last 24 months that's mildly annoying for a lot of people is everyone's sitting on the sidelines.
You're absolutely correct. There are trillions of dollars in the U.S. and around the globe that are waiting to be invested, waiting to be deployed, whether it's actually coming in as venture capital, a true VC type of an approach, whether it's through acquiring companies, through a private equity, whether it's hedging against those. There's so much money on the sidelines. But for your podcast viewers, your audience, they've noticed it. They've seen it. There's uncertainty in the marketplace about the economy, what's happening. Interest rates have obviously gone up. And so what I see is, yes, I've made up a word. It's called sphincterization. And I think a lot of these money managers, these VCs, these hedge funds, these corporate VCs, their sphincters just kind of went, and they just shriveled up. They're like, I don't know what I should do with my money. I'm nervous about it. If I bet wrong, I'll just sit. And, they can't make returns. At some point, it's got to all kick free.
Yeah.
But you've seen it.
Yeah.
What's interesting is that last year, as reported, so in 2023, as reported by the Mountain West Capital Network, Utah had more M&A activity of any year ever, like $39 billion, if memory serves me right. And most of that was mergers and acquisition. Now, there were 5 that were all north of $1 billion. And, that really kind of moved the scale, moved the needle. But the reality is there's a lot of deals. And there's deals happening all the time right now.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. And unless you're paying attention or it's all aggregated, you don't know. But my goodness, like, let's get people off the sidelines and unsphinctered. Your careers are only so long managing all this money. I'm always shocked, like, as somebody that's mildly addicted to gambling, to not place bets for 2-3 years, which they can say whatever they want, but it's not that dissimilar. What are they not bored? I'm always just shocked that they can actually sit on the sidelines.
Part of that's going to come back to the investment thesis of their organization. And so some of them may be actually handcuffed.
Yeah.
They can't deploy capital, but we have seen what many on the street would say is a right sizing, if you will, of valuations. Valuations got pretty frothy there.
Oh, yeah.
Out of control in latter part of 2021, early part of 22. And, what isn't talked about a lot, and I'm not out there to try to hurt anybody, but there's been, particularly over the last 12-ish months, a fair amount of layoffs across the board in a lot of companies because they felt like the carnival would just continue forever. Mm-hmm. And so they got out over their skis as far as hiring more people than they really did need, and they were paying them more than they probably should have, right? It was, and from a payment/employment standpoint, Utah's in this kind of tough place for the entrepreneurs, for the executives out there. We're still sitting at under 3% employment, which basically means that for every 2 jobs that are open, there's 1 person looking for a job. And so if you're in HR, if you're an executive, you're scrambling to try to fill open positions. And if you look sideways at somebody, F you, I'm out of here, and go find another job and be, back employed, making the same or more money in, 2-4 weeks, so from that standpoint, that's tough. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens between now and early November, and then what that means. I listen to Bloomberg radio all the time when I'm in the car, and the reality is nobody knows what's going to happen. Is there going to be any interest rates, 1 interest rate cut, a second interest rate? What does that do? We don't know. But I think some sphincters may actually loosen up here soon.
I would bet, because there will be some sort of occurrence that happens in
There's
early
going to be
November.
movement. It's either going to get, depending upon the political spectrum, where you find yourself, it's going to be worse or better. And that's going to have definite implications on every aspect of business, from a solopreneur all the way up to a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah. Well, the cool thing is you can bet on what you think is going to happen. So you can bet right now in June or July on what's going to happen in November. Put your money where your mouth is.
Yeah, puts and calls, among other things. Sure, if you want to do that.
Yeah, which I do.
Okay, I'm not surprised.
I could keep talking to you forever, but I think we've run out of time. Last question. You are a big BYU Cougars fan.
Yeah.
Big 12? Is that where they are? Is it Big East,
Big
SEC,
12.
Mountain America Credit Union
Come
Conference?
on, you know where they are. They're in the Big 12.
I don't like the reshuffling.
So are the Utes. That's fine. It's part of the new financial world of major college sports. Yeah.
Follow the money.
Yeah.
How are they going to do this year?
How are the Cougs going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Which sport?
Football.
I don't know.
Okay.
I think they'll do better than last year. I don't know that they'll make a bowl game.
Oh.
The big question mark for me is actually, yes, quarterback, but offensive line. BYU struggled on the O-line last year on football. And so I don't know. To me, you asked the wrong question.
Basketball?
What's going to happen with basketball?
You'd think it's going to be an up year, don't you reckon?
Okay. If you're watching this, go to UtahMoneyWatch.com. You can subscribe for free. It takes you like 30 seconds at most. Go read why I believe that the new head coach, Kevin Young, has transformed not just BYU basketball, but BYU sports, period, forever. And he did it with one sentence. And I'll paraphrase that. That one sentence during his inaugural press conference was, my goal is to get my boys, my men, into professional basketball. I started at BYU a long time ago. Never has a coach ever said that. You talk to any good college professor, college educator, what's their goal? To help their students actually get a good job. Some of them like, no, I need to publish. Okay, fine. I don't like you and you shouldn't be here, right? But really, college is all about helping their students to get to the next part of their life, getting a job. Not everybody's going to make the pros, but they can. And if you have a coach and a coaching staff and a university that's focused on that, BYU now has 4 top 100 incoming freshmen for their basketball team. Never, ever has that happened. That's a different program there.
Yeah.
It's going to be really exciting to see what happens.
It is interesting what one person can do.
Yes.
Very interesting.
Yes.
All right. UtahMoneyWatch.com.
Yes.
David Politis, always a pleasure. We'll have you on again, and we'll just keep getting some good updates.
That sounds great. Thanks, Garrett. Thanks for having me.